They told her to stand down. Command was clear: do not engage, fall back with the others. But as Elena Kovač watched through her scope, 540 Marines pinned down in a kill zone, ammunition running dry, medics screaming for backup that would never come. She made a choice that would either save an entire regiment or end her career forever. What happened in the next 11 hours defied every rule in the military playbook. This is the story of the sniper who broke protocol, disobeyed direct orders, and became the only thing standing between 540 soldiers and certain death. Before we continue, let us know where you're watching from. If you're enjoying this, don't miss out. Subscribe now for more. The morning of September 14th broke clear and cold over the Vranica Mountains. The kind of morning where you could see for 30 kilometers in any direction, where the alpine air was so crisp it felt like breathing glass. For most people, it would have been beautiful. For Elena Kovač, perched on a rocky outcrop at 2,400 meters elevation, it was perfect hunting weather. She'd been lying in the same position for 6 hours, her ghillie suit blending seamlessly with the scrub brush and limestone. Her rifle, a customized M110 Semi-Automatic Sniper System, rested against her shoulder like an extension of her own body. Through her scope, she could see everything: the convoy routes below, the distant shimmer of the forward operating base, and the seemingly empty ridgelines that she knew weren't empty at all. Elena was 26 years old, originally from a small village outside Ljubljana. She'd grown up hunting with her grandfather in the Julian Alps, learning patience before she learned to read, understanding wind and weather before she understood arithmetic. When she enlisted at 18, the recruiters had laughed at first, a slight woman, barely 60 kilograms, wanting to be a sniper. But she'd outshot every man in her training class, and the laughter had stopped. That was 8 years ago. Now, she was attached to the 3rd Marine Expeditionary Unit as a designated marksman, part of a joint NATO operation in the disputed border regions. Officially, there was no conflict here. Officially, this was a peacekeeping mission. But Elena had been counting the bodies for 3 weeks, and the numbers told a different story. Raven 6, this is Overwatch 2. I've got movement on Ridge 47. Multiple signatures. They're setting up firing positions. Static crackled in her ear. Then the voice of Captain Morrison, the battalion commander. Overwatch 2, maintain observation only. Do not engage. Command wants confirmation before we escalate. Elena's jaw tightened. Through her scope, she could see them clearly now. At least 20 hostiles, maybe more, establishing a perfect ambush position overlooking the main supply route. In 2 hours, a convoy of 540 Marines would be rolling through that exact location, completely exposed. Raven 6, those positions overlook Route Amber. If the convoy comes through, I'm aware of the tactical situation, Overwatch 2. Morrison cut her off. Intelligence says the area is clear. Those are probably just local militia, not combatants. Hold your position and observe. That's an order. Elena wanted to argue, but 8 years of military discipline held her tongue. Copy that, Raven 6. Observing only. She watched as the enemy fighters, and there was no doubt in her mind that's what they were, continued their preparations. They worked with practiced efficiency, setting up crew-served weapons, establishing fields of fire, digging in mortar positions. This wasn't a local militia. This was a coordinated military operation. Her spotter, Corporal James Reeves, shifted slightly beside her. He was a good soldier, methodical and calm, but he was also young. This was his first deployment. They're setting up a kill zone, he whispered, his voice tight with tension. I know. We have our orders, Reeves. We observe. But even as she said it, her mind was racing through calculations. Distance to targets, 800 to 1,200 meters. Wind, 3 knots from the southwest. Temperature, dropping as clouds moved in from the north. She could take out the machine gun nests first, then the mortar teams. With surprise on her side, she could eliminate at least half of them before they even knew where the shots were coming from. But orders were orders. 2 hours later, Elena watched through her scope as the convoy appeared on the horizon, a long line of vehicles carrying 540 Marines completely unaware of what waited for them. Her finger rested lightly on the trigger guard, her heart rate steady at 55 beats per minute. Years of training had taught her to control every physiological response, to become as calm as the mountains themselves. Raven 6, this is Overwatch 2. Convoy is approaching the kill zone. Request permission to engage hostile positions. Another burst of static. Negative. Overwatch 2. Intelligence has cleared that sector. Do not engage. I repeat, do not engage. Elena's eyes never left her scope. The lead vehicle was now 500 meters from the ambush point, 400 meters, 300 meters. Beside her, Reeves was practically vibrating with tension. They're gonna get slaughtered. She knew he was right. Every instinct, every hour of training, every lesson learned in these mountains told her exactly what was about to happen. The convoy would roll into the valley, the enemy would open fire from 3 sides, and 540 Marines would be trapped with nowhere to go and no cover. It would be a massacre. 200 meters. Elena's finger moved from the trigger guard to the trigger itself. The world narrowed to what she could see through her scope. The lead machine gunner, his finger on the trigger of a PKM belt-fed weapon, waiting for the perfect moment. 100 meters. Raven 6, this is Overwatch 2. Targets are preparing to fire. Request immediate permission to... The lead vehicle of the convoy, a heavily armored transport carrying 18 Marines, erupted in a ball of flame and twisted metal. The IED had been buried perfectly, positioned for maximum devastation. Before the smoke even cleared, the mountainside came alive with muzzle flashes. Through her scope, Elena watched in horror as tracers and rocket-propelled grenades tore into the convoy. The Marines were trying to respond, but they'd been caught completely exposed on a narrow mountain road with steep cliffs on one side and a sheer drop on the other. There was nowhere to go, nowhere to hide. Raven 6, this is Overwatch 2. Elena's voice was sharp now, cutting through the chaos erupting on the radio net. Convoy is under heavy fire, multiple casualties. Request permission to engage. Morrison's voice came back, barely audible over the sound of explosions and screaming. Overwatch 2, fall back to Rally Point Echo. I repeat, fall back. We're calling in air support. Air support is 20 minutes out, minimum, Elena shouted back. These Marines don't have 20 minutes. Those are your orders, Overwatch 2. Fall back now. Elena didn't move. Through her scope, she could see the young Marine. Couldn't have been more than 19, trying to drag his wounded squad leader to cover. A burst of machine gun fire tore through both of them. She watched them fall, watched them die, and something inside her made a decision that her conscious mind hadn't quite caught up to yet. Reeves, she said quietly, her voice suddenly calm again. Call out wind. Her spotter stared at her. Elena, we have orders to... Wind, Reeves. Now. He hesitated for only a second, then his training kicked in. Winds picked up, 4 knots, southwest, gusting to 6. Elena's world narrowed to the mathematics of death. First target, the PKM gunner who was systematically shredding the Marines trying to establish a defensive position. Range, 947 meters. Wind, 4 knots. Elevation, she was shooting downhill at a 15-degree angle. Her finger tightened on the trigger. The rifle bucked against her shoulder with familiar precision. Through the scope, she saw the machine gunner's head snap back, his weapon going silent. She didn't wait to confirm the kill. She was already acquiring the next target. You just disobeyed a direct order, Reeves. But he was already calling out the next wind reading. Winds picked up, 6 knots, southwest. They're moving. Elena led the target slightly, accounting for movement and wind. Squeezed. The mortar operator dropped, and his assistant looked around wildly trying to figure out where the shot had come from. Elena's third round answered that question permanently. Raven 6, this is Overwatch 2, she radioed, her voice steady even as she worked the bolt and acquired another target. I'm engaging hostile positions. Convoy needs immediate support. Morrison's response was sharp and furious. Overwatch 2, you are ordered to cease fire and fall back immediately. That is a direct order. Elena didn't respond. She was too busy saving lives. The enemy fighters had started to realize they were taking fire from somewhere, but they couldn't pinpoint her position. Elena used their confusion ruthlessly. She moved systematically through the ambush positions, prioritizing targets based on threat level. Machine gunners first, then the RPG teams, then anyone who looked like they were trying to coordinate the attack. Reeves has stopped questioning her. He'd fallen into the rhythm of their partnership, calling wins and ranges, helping her identify the highest value targets. RPG team, you're 10 o'clock, 890 meters. Scene. Her shot caught the RPG gunner just as he was raising the weapon to his shoulder. The rocket fired wild, arcing uselessly into the sky before exploding against the mountain. Below, the Marines were starting to fight back more effectively. With the heavy weapons suppressed, they could actually move, could actually establish defensive positions. Elena could hear their radio chatter now, confused, desperate, but organizing. Where the hell is that fire coming from? Someone's taking out their gun positions. I don't care who it is, God bless them. Corpsmen! We need corpsmen up here now! Elena kept firing. Her trigger finger moved with metronomic precision. Shoot, work the bolt, breathe, acquire, shoot. The semi-automatic M110 wasn't the fastest rifle, but in her hands, it was devastatingly efficient. She'd brought 12 magazines, 20 rounds each. She was through her 4th magazine now, and every shot had counted. But there were so many of them. For every target she eliminated, 2 more seemed to appear. She could see the enemy starting to adapt, starting to realize the fire was coming from the high ground to their north. Some of them were beginning to turn their weapons toward her position. They've spotted us, Reeves said, his voice tight. We need to displace. Not yet. The Marines are still pinned down in Sector 3. A line of tracers walked up the hillside toward their position, close enough that Elena could hear the supersonic crack as rounds passed overhead. Reeves pressed himself into the ground, but Elena remained steady, her eye never leaving the scope. She found the shooter, another machine gunner, this one with a better position and a better angle on the convoy. Range, 1,340 meters, her longest shot yet. The wind had picked up even more, swirling unpredictably in the mountain passes. This wasn't a shot she could afford to miss. Elena took a breath, held it, felt for the rhythm of her heartbeat. Between beats, between breaths, in that moment of perfect stillness, she squeezed the trigger. The machine gunner dropped, and the firing position went silent. Raven 6, this is Overwatch 2, she radioed. Hostile position suppressed in Sector 1, 2, and 4. Convoy should be able to consolidate and move to defensible terrain. Morrison's voice came back, and he sounded different now, less angry, more uncertain. Overwatch 2, how many shooters do you have up there? Just me and my spotter, sir. There was a long pause. You're telling me one sniper is holding off an entire ambush force? I'm not holding them off, sir. I'm killing them. The reality of what Elena had done started to sink in as the initial chaos subsided. She'd fired 63 rounds in 18 minutes, eliminated 22 confirmed targets, and disrupted an entire enemy operation. But she'd also committed one of the gravest offenses in military law. She disobeyed a direct order from a superior officer during combat operations. Through her scope, she watched the Marines below finally establishing a defensive perimeter. They were dragging wounded behind cover, setting up their own firing positions, calling for medevac. She'd given them a chance, bought them time with blood and bullets. But the enemy wasn't finished. "Movement on Ridge 51, Reeves called out, his binoculars scanning the opposite hillside. "They're repositioning. Looks like... Damn, that's at least another platoon-sized element." Elena swung her scope to the new position. He was right. Fresh fighters were moving into position, these ones more disciplined, more organized. They weren't making the same mistakes as the first wave. These were professionals. "They're bringing up a technical," Reeves said, his voice tense. "Heavy machine gun mounted on a truck. If that gets into position..." "I see it." The vehicle was moving carefully along a ridgeline road, staying in defilade, using the terrain for cover. Smart. The gun mounted on the back looked like a DSHK, a Soviet-era heavy machine gun that could tear through the Marines' light armor like paper. Range, 1,520 meters. Moving target, unpredictable wind. And she needed to hit not the gunner, but the driver. Stop the vehicle before it reached its firing position. Elena made the calculations instinctively now, her mind processing variables faster than conscious thought. She led the target, accounting for the vehicle's speed, the wind drift, the bullet drop over that distance. The shot would take almost 2 full seconds to reach the target. 2 seconds where everything could change. She fired. The driver slumped forward, and the technical veered wildly off the road, tumbling down the mountainside in a cascade of rock and metal. The heavy machine gun went silent before it ever fired a shot. "Raven 6, this is Overwatch 2. Second wave is moving in from the east. I count 30-plus hostiles with heavy weapons. Convoy needs to move now while they're still repositioning." Morrison's response was immediate. "Overwatch 2, air support is still 12 minutes out. Can you keep them suppressed?" Elena looked at her remaining ammunition. 4 magazines left, 80 rounds, 30-plus enemies, and more could be coming. The math wasn't good, but it was all they had. "I can try, sir." "Negative." Morrison's voice was firm now, decisive. "I'm ordering you to fall back. You've done enough. Get to the rally point." "Sir, if I fall back, those Marines..." "Will have to hold their own position until air support arrives. You've given them a fighting chance, Overwatch 2. Now I'm giving you a chance to survive this. Fall back. That's an order." Elena stared through her scope at the Marines below. She could see a medic working frantically on a wounded soldier, see fire teams coordinating their fields of fire, see a young lieutenant trying to organize a retreat under fire. They were surviving because of her. If she left now, how many would die before the air support arrived? Reeves touched her arm. "Elena, we need to go. They know where we are now. Another few minutes and they'll have our position zeroed in." He was right. A mortar round impacted 50 meters downslope from their position, then another closer. The enemy was walking fire toward them, trying to flush them out or kill them outright. Professional soldiers would have those coordinates locked in within minutes. Elena made her decision. She keyed her radio one more time. "Raven 6, this is Overwatch 2. I'm sorry, sir, but I can't follow that order. These Marines need cover, and I'm the only one who can provide it. I'll face whatever consequences come later, but right now I have work to do." She released the radio before Morrison could respond, and turned to Reeves. "You should go. Get to the rally point. There's no reason for both of us to face court-martial." Reeves looked at her for a long moment, then settled back into his spotter position. "With respect, ma'am, screw that. Winds picking up to 7 knots, southwest, and you've got targets at your 2 o'clock, 980 meters. We've got work to do." The sun climbed higher, turning the mountain valley into a furnace. Elena's ghillie suit, perfect for concealment, became an oven that baked her alive. Sweat stung her eyes, but she didn't move to wipe it away. Movement meant detection, and detection meant death. The battle had transformed into something else now, a deadly chess match played across mountainous terrain. The enemy knew approximately where she was, but approximately wasn't good enough at these ranges. They tried mortars, tried suppressing fire, even tried flanking maneuvers. Elena and Reeves had countered each move with precision fire and careful position changes. She'd moved 3 times now,
Never more than 50 meters, always staying within effective range of the trapped Marines. Each move was a calculated risk. Expose yourself to move or stay in a compromised position and wait for the enemy to zero in. So far, they'd stayed ahead of the calculations. Contact, you're 11 o'clock. Sniper team, they're setting up in those rocks, 1,100 meters. Elena found them in her scope. 2 men, one with a rifle, one with a spotting scope. They were good, using the terrain well, but they'd made one mistake. A single piece of their rifle barrel caught the sunlight, glinting for just a fraction of a second. It was enough. Her round took the sniper through the upper chest. His spotter dove for cover, but not before Elena put a second round through the rocks he was hiding behind. The 7.62 millimeter round fragmented against the stone, and the spotter didn't move again. Air support is 5 minutes out, Morrison's voice crackled over the radio. He'd stopped ordering her to retreat. Now he was just feeding her information, helping her stay alive. They're coming in hot with gun runs along the eastern ridge. Copy that. Tell them to watch for friendlies at grid 227. That's my position. Below, the Marines had managed to consolidate into a tighter defensive position. They'd taken casualties. Elena could see at least 40 bodies covered with ponchos and many more wounded, but they were holding. Every minute she bought them was another Marine who might survive. But ammunition was becoming critical. She was down to her last magazine, 20 rounds, 20 shots to hold off an unknown number of enemies for 5 more minutes. Reeves was scanning with a spotting scope when he suddenly went rigid. Elena, you need to see this. She followed his direction and felt her blood run cold. On the ridgeline to the east, the enemy was bringing up something new, a Zu-23 anti-aircraft gun. Twin-barreled 23mm cannons that could fire 2,000 rounds per minute. Against aircraft, it was deadly. Against the lightly armored Marine vehicles below, it would be apocalyptic. And it was outside her effective range, maybe 1,800 meters, maybe more. A shot she'd never attempted under conditions that made it nearly impossible. I can't make that shot, Elena said quietly. It was the first time she'd admitted limitation. But you have to try. If that gun gets into position, I know. She did the math again, hoping it would somehow change. It didn't. At 1,800 meters, her bullet would drop over 20 feet. The wind alone could push it off target by meters. And she needed to hit not just the gun, but the gunner. Disable the weapon before it could fire. But what choice did she have?
2.3 seconds. That's how long the bullet took to travel 1,847 meters through shifting mountain winds, across temperature gradients, over terrain that seemed designed to catch and redirect projectiles. 2.3 seconds where Elena held her breath, where the entire battle seemed to pause, where everything balanced on the edge of a single copper-jacketed round. Through her scope, she watched the gunner's head snap back. The Zu-23 was silent before it ever fired. Holy! Reeves didn't finish the sentence. There were no words for what he'd just witnessed. Elena didn't celebrate. She was already scanning for the next threat, working the bolt, chambering her second-to-last round. 19 shots left. 4 minutes until air support. The enemy response was immediate and overwhelming. They'd watched their anti-aircraft gun go down, watched their positions get eliminated one by one, and now they were done being cautious. Fire erupted from multiple positions simultaneously, a desperate, furious attempt to kill the ghost who had been haunting them from the mountains. Rounds cracked overhead, impacted around their position. Mortar barrage walked up the hillside, each explosion closer than the last. Elena and Reeves pressed themselves into the rocks, feeling the ground shake with each detonation. "We need to move," Reeves shouted over the explosions. "They've got us bracketed." 30 seconds, Elena said calmly, checking her watch. "Air support in 30 seconds. We move, we lose our firing position. We stay, we're dead." Elena didn't argue. He was probably right. But 30 seconds, that's all the Marines needed. 30 more seconds of suppressing fire, of keeping the enemy's heads down, of buying time for those pilots to arrive and turn the tide. She rose to a knee, exposing herself to get a better angle on an enemy position that was directing fire at the convoy. Reckless, suicidal even, but necessary.
She put 2 quick rounds into the position, saw movement cease, then dropped back to cover as return fire peppered her previous position. 15 seconds. Another mortar barrage, this one so close that shrapnel pinged off the rocks around them. Elena felt something hot score across her left arm, but there was no time to check the damage. She fired again, methodical even in chaos. 10 seconds. The entire mountainside seemed to be shooting at them now. Elena had become the focal point of the enemy's rage and fear, the invisible force that had destroyed their perfect ambush. They knew if they could just eliminate her, the Marines below would be vulnerable again. 5 seconds. Elena's last round in the magazine eliminated a machine gun team. She reached for her final magazine, 19 rounds, all that stood between her and being defenseless. Her fingers found empty space. The magazine wasn't there. She looked down, saw it lying 3 meters away. Must have been knocked free by the mortar blast. Might as well have been 3 kilometers. The distance was covered by overlapping fields of fire. Reeves saw it too. Without hesitation, he lunged for it. "Reeves, no!"
Elena's shout was lost in the roar of incoming fire. Her spotter scrambled across the open ground, his hand outstretched for the magazine. He almost made it. Almost. A burst of automatic fire caught him mid-reach, spinning him around. He fell, the magazine clutched in his hand. Elena moved without thinking. She threw herself across the gap, grabbed Reeves by his tactical vest, and dragged him back behind cover. Bullets tracked her movement, close enough that she felt their passage like angry wasps. One round clipped her helmet, snapping her head sideways, but she kept moving. She pulled Reeves behind the rocks and immediately checked his wounds. 2 hits, one in the shoulder, one in his side. Serious, but the body armor had caught the worst of it. He'd live, if she could stop the bleeding. If they could get out of here. "The magazine," Reeves gasped, his face pale with shock. He pressed it into her hand with blood-stained fingers. "You still have work to do." Elena slammed the magazine home just as the first F-16 screamed overhead. The sound was beautiful, the roar of American military power coming to settle the score. The pilot didn't waste time. His first gun run tore through the eastern ridgeline, 20mm cannon rounds walking through enemy positions like the hammer of God. She keyed her radio, trying to keep her voice steady, even as her hands shook with adrenaline. "Raven 6, this is Overwatch 2. My spotter is hit. I need immediate medevac at my position." Morrison's response was instant. "Negative, Overwatch 2. Your position is too hot. We'll get him out once the area is secure." Elena looked at Reeves. He was trying to stay conscious, but she could see him fading. The bleeding was worse than she'd initially thought. "Sir, he doesn't have time." Another F-16 made its run, this time with rockets. Explosions rippled across the mountainside, enemy positions disappearing in fire and smoke. The third aircraft came in low, so close Elena could see the pilot's helmet, and unleashed a devastating barrage on the remaining hostile positions. The enemy broke. Those who could still move began retreating, falling back to secondary positions or simply running. The ambush was over. The Marines were saved. But Elena wasn't watching the victory. She was applying pressure to Reeves's wounds, talking to him, keeping him conscious. "Stay with me, James. Air support's here. We won. You hear me? We won!" His eyes focused on her with effort. "Did we save them?" "All of them. Every single one. Because of you. Because you got me that magazine." He managed a weak smile. "Best retrieval I ever made." 30 minutes later, a medevac helicopter touched down on the ridgeline. Corpsmen rushed to Reeves, and Elena finally let herself step back, let someone else take over. She watched them load her spotter onto the helicopter, watched it lift off and bank toward the field hospital. Only then did she realize her own arm was bleeding. Her uniform was torn in a dozen places, and she'd been operating on pure adrenaline for the last 11 hours. Only then did she remember that she disobeyed direct orders during combat operations, broken protocol, and violated military law to do what needed to be done. Morrison's voice came over her radio now. Different, respectful, almost gentle. Overwatch 2. Air assets are conducting battle damage assessment. Preliminary count shows you eliminated 47 enemy combatants. 47. And you saved 540 Marines who would have died in that kill zone. Elena didn't know what to say to that. Didn't know how to process it. I'm also obligated to inform you that you're under arrest for disobeying direct orders during combat operations. A security team is coming to escort you back to base. I'm sorry, Elena. She looked down at the valley where the Marines were organizing, where medics were treating wounded, where soldiers who would have been dead were instead calling their families to tell them they were okay. I understand, sir, she said quietly. I'd do it again.
The military police arrived in a Humvee 40 minutes later, their faces unreadable behind dark sunglasses. Sergeant First Class Rodriguez, the team leader, approached Elena with handcuffs in his hand, looking deeply uncomfortable with his assignment. "Ma'am, I need you to surrender your weapon and come with us," he said, his voice formal but not unkind. Elena handed over her rifle, the weapon that had just saved 540 lives, and allowed herself to be cuffed. The irony wasn't lost on her. As they led her down the mountain, she passed groups of Marines who'd been in the convoy. They stopped what they were doing to watch her walk by. Then something unexpected happened. One Marine, a young corporal with his arm in a sling, stepped forward and saluted. Then another. Then another. Within moments, every Marine who could stand was at attention, saluting the woman being led away in handcuffs. Some had tears streaming down their faces. Rodriguez stopped, clearly uncertain how to handle this. "Return to your duties," he ordered, but his voice lacked conviction. A captain stepped forward, the same lieutenant Elena had watched through her scope, now with a field promotion. "Sergeant, with respect, that woman saved our entire company. Every man and woman here owes her their life. Sir, I have my orders. I know you do, and she broke hers. But before you take her, I want her to see what she saved." The captain gestured, and Elena saw it. Medics were loading wounded onto helicopters, but they were loading live wounded, soldiers who would recover, who would go home. The covered bodies she'd counted earlier, 40 Marines who died in the initial ambush, but not 540, not the massacre that would have happened without her. The captain's voice cracked as he spoke directly to Elena. "My wife is pregnant with our first child. I was supposed to video chat with her tonight, find out if it's a boy or girl. Because of you, I'll be there for that call. Because of you, my kid will know their father." He stepped back and saluted again, holding it until Rodriguez finally nodded and led Elena away. The detention facility at the forward operating base was a small concrete building, more storage room than prison. They put her in a cell with a cot, a blanket, and a small window that looked out at the mountains where she'd spent the last 11 hours fighting. She sat on the cot and finally allowed herself to feel everything she'd been suppressing, the fear, the exhaustion, the weight of 47 lives taken, even if they were enemy combatants. Her hands started to shake, the adrenaline finally wearing off, and she pressed them together to make it stop. The door opened. Morrison walked in accompanied by a colonel Elena didn't recognize. The colonel was older, with gray hair and the hardened look of someone who'd seen too many wars. "Leave us," the colonel said to the guard. When they were alone, he sat down across from Elena. "I'm Colonel Hayes, Judge Advocate General's office. I'm here to inform you of the charges being brought against you." Elena straightened. "Yes, sir." "Disobeying a direct order during combat operations. Engaging enemy forces without authorization. Failure to follow rules of engagement. Each charge carries significant prison time." He paused, studying her. "Do you understand the severity of your situation?" "I do, sir." "Do you have anything to say in your defense?" Elena thought about it, really thought about it. She could explain the tactical situation, the intelligence failure, the imminent threat. She could argue necessity, could claim she'd made a battlefield decision that command couldn't see from their position. But in the end, it came down to something simpler. Sir, I saw 540 Marines about to die in a kill zone. I had the skills and position to prevent that. Following orders would have meant watching them die. I couldn't do that. I won't apologize for saving their lives, even if it costs me my career. Hayes was quiet for a long moment. Then, surprisingly, the corners of his mouth twitched upward slightly. Off the record, Sergeant Kovač, I'd have done the same damn thing. On the record, you've put me in an impossible position. The law is clear. You broke it. He stood to leave, then paused at the door. The preliminary investigation will take 72 hours. I suggest you use that time to prepare your defense. You are going to need it.
The next 72 hours existed in a strange limbo. Elena remained in detention while investigators combed through every second of the battle, every radio transmission, every decision made. She was interviewed 6 times, each session lasting hours, each investigator trying to find some angle, some mitigating factor that could change the fundamental truth. She disobeyed direct orders. On the second day, Reeves was brought in on a stretcher to give his statement. He was pale but alive, recovering from surgery. They placed him in the interview room across from Elena, both of them on different sides of the legal process now. Tell us about Sergeant Kovač's actions on the day in question, the investigator, a major named Peterson, asked him. Reeves didn't hesitate. She saved my life, sir, saved all our lives. When the convoy was ambushed, we had a clear view of the kill zone. We radioed command for permission to engage, but intelligence said the area was clear. Command ordered us to observe only. And Sergeant Kovač disobeyed that order? She followed her conscience, sir. She saw Marines dying and had the ability to stop it. What would you have done? Peterson's face remained neutral. I'm asking about her actions, Corporal, not hypotheticals. My answer stands, sir. They brought in the Marines from the convoy, one by one. Each told the same story from different angles. The ambush, the heavy casualties, the mysterious sniper fire that had suppressed the enemy positions and saved their lives. The captain with the pregnant wife testified for 45 minutes, breaking down twice as he described watching his Marines die in those first minutes. If Sergeant Kovač had followed orders, Peterson asked him, what would have happened? The captain's answer was blunt. We'd all be dead, sir, every single one of us. That ambush was perfectly planned. Without her intervention, it would have been the single worst loss of American forces in this theater. Instead, we lost 40 Marines. 40 is a tragedy. 540 would have been a catastrophe. On the third day, they brought in Morrison. The battalion commander looked like he'd aged years in just 3 days. He sat down heavily and waited for the questions. Captain Morrison, you gave Sergeant Kovač explicit orders not to engage, is that correct? Yes. And she disobeyed those orders? Morrison was quiet for a moment. Yes. She also saved 540 lives by doing so. That's not... I know what you're going to say, Major. The law doesn't care about results, only about obedience. But I'm sitting here having to wrestle with the fact that my orders, if followed, would have killed 540 Marines. Intelligence was wrong, I was wrong, Sergeant Kovač was right. How do I court-martial someone for being right? Peterson leaned forward. You understand that military discipline requires... I understand that military discipline is what keeps us alive and effective. I also understand that I gave an order based on faulty intelligence that would have resulted in massacre. Sergeant Kovač saw what I couldn't see from command. She made a decision, and she was willing to face the consequences. That takes a different kind of courage than just following orders. Are you saying she shouldn't face consequences? Morrison met his eyes. I'm saying I don't know what the right answer is anymore. I just know that 540 families will have their loved ones coming home because she broke the rules. The investigation concluded on the evening of the third day. Colonel Hayes reviewed all the testimony, all the evidence, all the battlefield recordings. Then he sat down to write his recommendation to the commanding general. The law was clear, the evidence was clear. Sergeant Elena Kovač had committed multiple violations of military law. The recommended punishment was a court-martial, dishonorable discharge, and prison time. But Hayes had been a soldier for 30 years. He'd seen rigid adherence to rules get people killed, and he'd seen intelligent disobedience save lives. This case sat at the intersection of both, and his recommendation would determine not just Elena's fate, but set a precedent for how the military handled such situations in the future. He began to type.
The commanding general's office was exactly what Elena expected. Flags, commendations, photos with presidents and foreign dignitaries. General Marcus Ashford sat behind his desk, Colonel Hayes standing beside him, both men studying Elena with expressions she couldn't quite read. "At ease, Sergeant," Ashford said, his voice gravelly from decades of shouting orders. "Sit down. We need to talk." Elena sat, her spine straight, despite the exhaustion that had settled into her bones. She hadn't slept properly in 4 days, running on adrenaline and cheap coffee. Ashford slid a file across the desk. "That's Colonel Hayes' investigation report. I've read it 3 times. Do you know what it recommends?" "No, sir." "Court-martial, dishonorable discharge, prison time." He paused, watching her reaction. Elena kept her face neutral, though her heart was hammering. "It also includes testimony from 127 Marines whose lives you saved, 3 chaplains, 2 senators whose children were in that convoy, and a personal letter from the mother of Corporal James Reeves, thanking you for keeping her son alive." He opened another folder. "This is the after-action report from the battle. Enemy force strength, estimated 80 to 100 combatants. They had perfect positioning, perfect planning, and they had us completely by surprise. Initial casualties in the first 2 minutes, 40 dead, 73 wounded. Then you started shooting." Ashford stood and walked to the window, hands clasped behind his back. "Our intelligence was wrong, Sergeant. Catastrophically wrong. We had reports saying that sector was clear of hostile forces. We had satellite imagery, drone footage, signals intelligence, all of it pointing to a safe corridor. We were wrong, and you were right." "Sir, I didn't—" He held up a hand. "Let me finish. You disobeyed a direct order based on what you saw with your own eyes. You trusted your judgment over your commanding officers. In any normal situation, that's insubordination. That's a career-ending offense. But this wasn't a normal situation." Hayes stepped forward. "Sergeant Kovač, the General and I have been discussing this for 2 days. We've consulted with the Secretary of Defense, with legal counsel, with combat veterans whose opinions we trust. The law is clear about what you did. The morality of it is equally clear. The problem is those 2 things are in direct conflict." Ashford turned back to face her. "So we're giving you a choice. Option 1, we proceed with the court-martial. You'll have your day in court, you can present your case, and a panel of officers will decide your fate. Given the circumstances, you might be acquitted, but there are no guarantees. The process alone will be grueling, and it could end with you in Leavenworth." Elena felt her throat tighten, but she kept her voice steady. "And option 2, sir?" "Option 2 is unconventional." Ashford exchanged a glance with Hayes. "We administratively separate you from the military. Not a dishonorable discharge, but not honorable either. A general discharge under other than honorable conditions. You leave the service, you keep your benefits, and this incident gets buried in classified files." "You're asking me to just walk away?" "We're offering you a way out of an impossible situation," Hayes said. "The military needs discipline, needs soldiers who follow orders, but we also need soldiers who can think, who can make hard decisions under pressure. You did both. You made a decision, and you're willing to face the consequences. This option lets you avoid the consequences while preserving military order." Elena looked between them. "What happens to the precedent, sir? If I take this deal, what happens the next time a soldier faces this situation?" Ashford's expression hardened with respect. "That's the question, isn't it? If we court-martial you, and the panel acquits you, we're telling soldiers it's okay to disobey orders if they think they're right. If we court-martial you and convict you, we're telling soldiers to follow orders even when they know people will die. And if we make you disappear quietly, we're not addressing it at all. There is no good answer here, Sergeant, just degrees of bad ones. Elena stood and walked to the window, looking out at the base where 540 Marines were going about their duties, alive because of what she'd done. She thought about Reeves, recovering in the hospital, about the captain's unborn child who would know their father, about 40 families who would get folded flags and hollow words of gratitude. Permission to speak freely, sir? Granted. I didn't join the military to make easy choices, or to protect my own career. I joined because I believed in something bigger than myself. What I did out there, I'd do it again tomorrow. I won't apologize for it, and I won't slink away quietly as if I did something wrong.
Ashford studied her for a long moment, then did something unexpected. He smiled. Colonel Hayes said you'd say something like that. He also said you'd be an idiot to turn down the deal, but he respected the hell out of you for it. Sir? The general returned to his desk and pulled out a third folder Elena hadn't seen before. There's an option 3 we haven't discussed yet. It's unprecedented, potentially controversial, and will probably cause headaches at the Pentagon for years to come. He opened the folder, revealing a document with official seals and signatures. After reviewing all the evidence, considering the unique circumstances, and consulting with people far above my pay grade, we've decided to take a different approach. No court-martial, no discharge. Elena's mind reeled. Sir, I don't understand. We're issuing you an official reprimand for failure to follow proper communication protocols with command. That goes in your file. We're also recommending you for the Silver Star for conspicuous gallantry in action against an enemy force. That also goes in your file. And we're promoting you to Staff Sergeant, effective immediately. Sir, that doesn't make sense. How can you reprimand me and medal me for the same action? Hayes stepped forward, his expression serious. Because, Sergeant, Staff Sergeant, what you did embodied both the best and worst of military service. You saved lives through courage and skill. You also broke the chain of command and violated direct orders. Both things are true, and both deserve recognition. Ashford nodded. The reprimand ensures we maintain discipline. No soldier can look at your case and think disobedience is without consequences. The medal ensures we maintain humanity. No soldier can look at your case and think saving lives is wrong. The promotion ensures we keep good soldiers who make hard choices. Elena felt dizzy, struggling to process what she was hearing. What about the precedent, sir? What does this tell other soldiers? It tells them the truth, Ashford said firmly, that military service is complex, that sometimes there are no right answers, only choices you have to live with, that we value both discipline and initiative, both following orders and saving lives. It tells them that if they find themselves in an impossible situation and they do what they genuinely believe is right, we'll look at the totality of their actions, not just whether they checked all the boxes. Hayes added, it also tells them there will be consequences for breaking the rules, even with good intentions. Your reprimand is permanent. It will affect your career progression. You'll never make Sergeant Major with that in your file, but you'll also have a Silver Star, and you'll have the respect of every Marine whose life you saved. Elena sat down again, her legs suddenly unsteady. What about the intelligence failure, sir? The fact that command sent that convoy into an ambush. Ashford's jaw tightened. That's being addressed separately. 3 officers have already been relieved of duty. Our entire intelligence protocol for this theater is being overhauled.
You exposed a critical failure in our system, and we're fixing it. Sir, I need to know, if I accept this, am I setting a precedent that it's okay to disobey orders? The general leaned forward, his eyes intense. You're setting a precedent that we trust our soldiers to make impossible decisions under fire, and that we'll judge those decisions based on the entirety of the circumstances, not just the rule book. Is that perfect? No. Will it be messy sometimes? Absolutely. But the alternative is creating robots who follow orders even when those orders will get people killed. He stood and extended his hand. The decision is yours, Staff Sergeant Kovač. Accept the reprimand and the medal, or demand your court-martial. Either way, you've already changed this military. The only question is how that story ends. Elena stood and shook his hand, feeling the weight of 540 lives saved, 40 lives lost, and a precedent that would outlive them all. She thought about the young Marine she'd watched through her scope, about Reeves lying in the hospital, about her grandfather teaching her to hunt in the Julian Alps. I accept, sir. Both the reprimand and the medal. Both the consequences and the recognition. Hayes smiled slightly. Good, because we have one more thing to discuss. We need instructors at the sniper school. People who can teach not just marksmanship, but judgment. People who've proven they can make the hard calls. Interested? Elena looked at both men, understanding finally what they really were offering. Not just a resolution to her case, but a future. A chance to train the next generation, to teach them not just how to shoot, but when and why, and what it costs. Yes, sir. I'm very interested.
2 years had passed since that September morning in the mountains. Elena stood at the National Infantry Museum, looking at the display that had just been unveiled. Her rifle, her ghillie suit, her worn boots, all preserved behind glass with a plaque that read, Staff Sergeant Elena Kovač, Silver Star, Mountain Valley Engagement, 540 lives saved. Next to it was a smaller display she'd insisted on, a photograph of the 40 Marines who died in the initial ambush, with their names listed. We honor the fallen, the plaque read, and remember that every victory has a cost. Reeves stood beside her in his dress uniform, recovered now, though he still walked with a slight limp. He'd been medically retired from active duty, but worked as a civilian instructor at the sniper school. You know they're going to study that engagement for decades, right? It's already required reading at every leadership school in the military. I know. That's what worries me. Why? Elena turned to face him. Because people will read about it and think they understand. They'll see 540 lives saved and think it was heroic. They won't understand the fear, the doubt, the weight of every decision. They won't understand that there were no good choices, just less bad ones. Maybe that's exactly what they need to understand, Reeves said quietly. That leadership isn't about having all the answers. It's about making the best decision you can with imperfect information and being willing to accept the consequences. Behind them, a group of young Marines approached the display, reading the plaques in reverent silence. Elena watched them, wondering which ones would face similar impossible choices, which ones would have the courage to make them, and which ones would carry the weight of those decisions for the rest of their lives. One of the young Marines, a lance corporal who couldn't have been more than 20, noticed Elena standing there. Her eyes widened as she recognized the uniform, the ribbons, the face from the photographs. "Ma'am," she said, coming to attention. "Staff Sergeant Kovač?" "At ease, Marine." The lance corporal hesitated, then asked the question Elena had heard 100 times since that day. "Ma'am, how did you know? How did you know to disobey orders? How did you know you were right?" Elena considered the question. Really considered it.
She could give the simple answer that she trusted her training, her instincts, her eyes, but this young Marine deserved the truth. I didn't know I was right. I just knew what would happen if I followed orders, and I couldn't live with that outcome. So I made a choice and accepted that it might cost me everything. That's not confidence, Lance Corporal. That's conscience. But what if you'd been wrong? What if intelligence had been right and you'd started a firefight that got people killed? Then I'd be in Leavenworth right now, and I deserve to be there. The choice to disobey orders is also the choice to accept the consequences if you're wrong. You don't get one without the other. The young Marine nodded slowly, processing this. Thank you, ma'am. That's helpful. As the group moved on, Reeves smiled. Still teaching, I see. Always. That's the deal I made, remember? The reprimand and the medal, the consequences and the recognition. I teach so the next generation understands both sides of that equation. Her phone buzzed with a text from Morrison, now a major commanding his own battalion. The message was simple. Another convoy through that valley today. 0 casualties. Intelligence protocols working. Your precedent matters. She showed the message to Reeves. 2 years later, and they're still using the lessons learned from that day. That's your real legacy, Reeves said. Not the 47 enemies you killed, or the 540 Marines you saved. It's the system you helped change, the protocols that got updated, the trust that got built between command and field operators, the understanding that sometimes the person on the ground sees things headquarters can't. Elena looked at the display one more time, her tools, her story, preserved for future generations. But more important than the artifacts was the conversation they sparked, the questions they raised, and the impossible decisions they forced people to confront. You ready? Reeves asked. The ceremony starts in 20 minutes. They're giving you the Distinguished Service Medal for your work at the sniper school. Another medal, another set of consequences. Elena smiled slightly. The balance never ends, does it? Would you want it to? She thought about the 40 Marines who died, the 540 who lived, and the countless others who'd benefited from the changes that followed. She thought about the weight of command, the burden of choice, and the price of conscience. No, she said finally. I wouldn't change any of it. As they walked toward the ceremony hall, Elena passed other displays, other soldiers, other wars, other impossible choices made under fire. Each one represented someone who'd stood at the intersection of duty and conscience, someone who'd made the hard call and lived with the results. She was part of that legacy now, not because she'd been perfect, but because she'd been willing to make the imperfect choice and accept both the consequences and the recognition that came with it. And somewhere in training centers and forward operating bases around the world, young soldiers were learning from her story, not just how to shoot, but when to shoot, and why, and what it costs when you pull the trigger. That was the real victory. Not the battle she'd won, but the lessons it had taught.